So let's imagine we've helped a person to define a goal, check their reason why and self-belief, and now we're going to do some possibility thinking with them. What I always have in my mind at this point are the 10 possibility thinking areas. And what's going to be really helpful for you as a coach is to know those off by heart. And I'm going to share with you a memory technique that I learnt, and it's just a story. It's what I call the elephant story. But before I do that, let's just remind ourselves about what we mean about the 10 possibility areas. When we did the original Go Mad research, we identified that people were asking themselves questions about areas to help them with their thinking and their planning. And when we actually looked at what those were and boiled them down into a solid set of questions, we found there was 10 areas that people were naturally asking themselves. So these are the 10. And whilst I'm going to go through them in this particular order, this is only for memory purposes. So the easiest place to start, particularly if a person has high self-belief when you're coaching them, is to start with possible tasks. Possible tasks and things to do. Move on to what possible resources could help you. Now, resources can mean many things. Materials, equipment. I often like to use the word stuff. When I'm coaching somebody, I might like to say, what possible stuff could help you? Because it keeps it quite broad and allows a person's imagination to, pick out whatever they term as stuff. Okay. If by the way I was coaching Pete, my gardener, I would probably say what materials, equipment, stuff could help you. So they're the two, tasks and resources. Those tend to go together as a pair. The next two also go together as a pair, and there are certain type of resources which could be people. But before we look at who could you possibly involve, what I found is useful to do is to ask a question, which is, what are the possible reasons for involving others? In other words, how could others possibly help you? Because if you actually get a list of reasons that people can help you, when you come on to the next question, which is who could possibly help you, you'll find that you've already opened the mind up and it's easier for people to come up with lists of people that could help them. Okay, so there's a pair, possible reasons and who are the people that could possibly help you. Now, just a little tip on this one, when you ask a person who could possibly help you, very often they go close to home, they go friends, family and colleagues. So you can obviously ask supplementary questions like who else in the whole wide world could possibly help you? You don't even have to know them. Dear World Wide Web, here's the internet. It could be people from history. So that whole involving others piece is probably the most lateral thinking piece of the whole Go Mad framework. So where were we? Involving others. Now, there's another pairing that go together. And again, this is just for memory purposes that I'm sharing this with you. If we look at the Go Mad framework here and we look at the buy-in line, we could think of possible ways to communicate our goal to others and possible ways to gain buy-in from those others to the goal. So possible ways to communicate are just communication methods, but possible ways to get buy-in are more about influencing strategies. Okay? Then we'll go on to a series of questions around obstacles. So the next one in our list of 10 is possible obstacles. Now obviously you could use your own language, you can say possible barriers, possible hurdles, possible things that might get in the way. This list that I'm giving you are just generic areas, and a good coach will change their language according to who they're speaking with. So possible obstacles, blockers, things that might get in the way. Also useful to consider possible risks. Risks and implications. And this isn't about achieving your goal. This is possible risks and implications that it's useful to consider in moving towards your goal. And these, let me give you an example. These could be tangible health and safety risks, or they could be more intangible, like the possible risk of upsetting someone. Okay? So possible risks and implications that it's useful to consider in terms of moving towards your goal. Now, if you think of obstacles and risks, and you've helped a person think of them, hopefully write them down as well, the next obvious thing to do is to be solution focused and look at what are the possible ways to overcome those obstacles and minimise the risks. So possible ways to overcome and minimise. And finally, the last one in our list of 10 is possible assumptions. Possible things that you might be believing or assuming but might not in fact be true. So hindering thoughts is an example of that. Ways that you're limiting yourself in some way. But very often a common assumption is people saying things like, they won't let me, or I'm too old, or I'm too young. They make an assumption about themselves and they never ever check it out. In the workplace, a person might go, we haven't got the budget. My manager won't say yes. Okay, but in fact, unless you ask, you never give the manager the chance to say yes. So 10 possibility areas, run through them, then we'll get into the story, the memory technique. Tasks, resources, reasons to involve others, people to involve, ways to communicate the goal to others, ways to get buy-in, possible obstacles, risks, ways to overcome and minimise those obstacles and risks, and possible assumptions. Here's the elephant story. Now, to do this, if you want to, you might want to just kind of like close your eyes, just listen to my voice, maybe just create a blank screen in front of your face. Because what I'm going to do is invite you to imagine in as vivid detail as you can, right? And I was taught some memory techniques by a world memory champion. And one of the things that he said to me was, if you want to make something memorable, make it memorable. In other words, make it bigger, brighter, bolder, more exaggerated. And the second thing he said was attach or associate something with it. So we're going to do that, and we're going to attach those 10 things together in the form of a story. And it's called the elephant story for an obvious reason. Imagine in your mind a normal size elephant. But then imagine that one of its tusks is 10 times the size of the elephant. Make it extraordinarily big, right? A great big white, gleaming, ivory tusk. So it makes it memorable because it's so big. That's the first thing to remember. Now, when you see tusk in your story, I nearly said it then, what you're actually saying to yourself is task. So of those 10 possibility thinking areas, you go, right, see the elephant, possible tusk, possible tasks. That gives you your first question. What possible tasks could help you? Now, picture that white ivory tusk. And then in your own handwriting, in red source, write the words resource. Red source, resource, get it? A bit of a connection. But actually paint it in big, bold writing across that tusk. So you see the word resources. That is your second thing to remember. Possible tasks, possible resources. Then imagining that white ivory tusk, dripping down from it, that red sauce. As it hits the ground, up jump giant raisins. Make them 6 foot. 6 foot tall raisins. So as you see the raisins, that reminds you of reasons. Raisins equals reasons. Bit tenuous, this story, but it's just to get it imprinted in your mind. As you see the raisins, they grow arms and legs and heads, and they become the raisin people. So imagine 6 foot tall raisin people, and that gives you the thing, possible reasons to involve others and the possible people to involve. Now, as you look at these people, imagine that they're all communicating one word. And that one word is the word goal. Imagine they're wearing t-shirts and across there they've got the word goal. Imagine that they're holding a flag and waving a flag, and on it it's got the word goal. Maybe they're texting on a phone, goal, goal, goal. Maybe one of them's got a loud hailer, goal, goal. And this represents possible ways to communicate your goal to others. So you've got to see the picture in your mind, make it very memorable, vivid, lots of different ways to communicate goal to others. That's the 5th of the 10 possibility thinking areas. The 6th one is imagine with all these goals being communicated, a great big football goal appears, right? Make it an enormous one. And in the middle of it is a £20 note. And as you look at that £20 note hanging from the crossbar and between the two posts, that reminds you of buy-in. You buy in to the goal. So just see that in your mind. People communicating goal, a goal appears, big £20 note, biggest you've ever seen. That represents buy-in. So we've now got possible ways to communicate our goal to others and possible ways to gain buy-in or influence people. Then imagine in front of this goal, lots of boulders, big rocks appear, right? Those boulders represent obstacles. So in your mind, put them all in front of the goal so you can hardly see the goal. And that will remind you of possible obstacles. Now the 8th in our list is, as you look at those obstacles, those boulders, I want you to imagine that in the middle is a perfectly round one, but it's not a rock or an obstacle. It is a perfectly round Farley's Rusk biscuit. The sort of thing that a parent would give a child when it's teething, to dunk it in something so it can soften up the biscuit. Okay? When you see rusk, a Farley's Rusk, make it very big and vivid, change one word and make it Farley's Risk. So now you've got possible obstacles, possible risks. And as you look at these obstacles and these risks, gradually just make them shrink down, smaller and smaller and smaller in your mind. This is minimising the obstacles and the risks. And then take a giant leap over. That is overcoming. So we're minimising and overcoming. Just do it in your mind. Just see it in your mind. Obstacles, risk, minimising, overcoming. And then all of a sudden, a donkey appears. Imagine an ass, but you're looking at the backside of an ass. It's an ass of an ass, a big ass. That should remind you of possible assumptions. That's it, okay? So, just run that story through your mind from the top. See the elephant's tusk, painted on it resources, dripping down, red sauce, hitting the ground, giant raisins. Raisins turn into people. The people are communicating goal, goal to others. Football goal appears, £20 note, buy-in. Obstacles, boulders appear in front of it. One of them is a perfectly round rusk biscuit. Change it to risk. They shrink down. We're a step over. And an ass appears. Possible assumptions. Run that through your mind several times, because that's the next key to having a great successful memory is repetition. Make it big, bright, bold. Associate it with other things, the elephant story, and then repeat it time and time again. Once you've done that, you will know the 10 possibility thinking areas. What you then need to do is put a what, a how, or a who possibly in front of them, and you get what possible tasks, what possible resources, who could you possibly involve, etc. Hopefully that works for you. It's just one way of remembering the 10 possibility thinking areas. Now, before we finish this session, I do want to share something with you. And that is, I've been training you to think about those 10 possibility thinking questions in a sequence. In reality, when you're coaching somebody, you will follow the flow of the conversation. So if somebody starts talking about obstacles or things in the way, you go with the flow and you go, well, what else could get in the way? How could you possibly overcome them? As a rule, when I'm coaching somebody and we've done the internal triangle of the goal, the reason why, and self-belief, and we're going into possibilities, if a person has a high level of self-belief, let's suppose it's a confident 7, 8, 9, or even 10, I will start at the top of that list and go tasks, resources, and go down. But if they're a 5 or a 6, and there's a bit of hesitancy, and you can tell they've got some hindering thoughts, start from the bottom of the elephant story and work back. So ask them about what possible obstacles are getting in the way, because they're thinking them at that time, right? What are the possible risks? How might you minimise those? And then bring in the involving others to help them overcome the obstacles, the tasks, to help them overcome the obstacles, the resources to help them overcome or minimise those risks. Okay? High self-belief, work through the elephant story. Low self-belief, start with the obstacles and risks and work back up. That's my top tip for possibility thinking.